Okay, good morning, good morning. We're continuing with learning through the Orach HaShulchan, trying to connect the Nigle and the Halacha to Nister and Penimei HaTorah. And we find ourselves now continuing in Siman Aleph of Orach Chaim. We're up to Sif Hey. The Orach HaShulchan is continuing to talk about, as he said before, Yesodei Torasenu, fundamental prerequisites, fundamental foundations that have to be addressed in order to begin getting at the halacha that eventually he'll get to starting in Sif Yud Zion. But we still have a ways to go, a couple of pages at least, of Yesodei HaTorah, foundational ideas in Torah that provide context and purpose and meaning for the halacha that he's then going to move on to discuss. So Sif Hey begins as follows. He says, Yesod HaTorah va'amad ha'avoda. The foundation of Torah, the pillar of all avoda, practical implementation of the Torah, practicing Torah. Lieda is to know, Sheyesh Elokim Echad Yachid Umiyuchad, to know that there is only one Elokim, Yachid Umiyuchad, totally singular, unparalleled, without comparison, without anything alongside it. Umiyuchad, entirely unified, entirely encompassing everything. There is nothing else. And there are no parts to that Elokim. That Elokim is entirely Yachid Umiyuchad v'hu bara kol ha'olamos. And that Elokim, that is Yachid Umiyuchad, somehow also created kol ha'olamos. All of the differentiated olamos, all of the created reality that's full of differentiation and myriad of individual creations. Both Echad, Yachid, Umiyuchad, there is only Elokim, there is only HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and at the same time, that same HaKadosh Baruch Hu was bara kol ha'olamos, created everything. V'hu mashkiach aleim, and he manages them, he oversees them, b'chol es u'b'chol raga, at every moment, at every second, at every time. That hashgacha is never, ever taken away. So, and if that hashgacha ever was taken away, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu's management and overseeing of reality that has been created in a way that seemingly might be understood as in tension with the achdus, the yachid u'miyuchad, the echad yachid u'miyuchad of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if that management was ever taken away, afrega, even for a second, then everything would revert to what they were before there was reality, which was tohu vavohu, before there was created, individuated, particularized, structured reality, kol ha'olamos, the kol ha'olamos that seemed to be perhaps in tension with the echad yachid u'miyuchad on some level, everything would revert immediately to tohu vavohu. Complete and total confusion, bilbul, an intermixing of things without clear lines of demarcation and separation and differentiation, because everything would be mixed together. So there would be no apples and oranges, there would be apranges, right, so to speak, right? Everything would be mixed together, tohu uvohu, and everything would be completely void and empty. There wouldn't be anything there, actually, because there wouldn't be hashgacha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is effectively a response to this impression of, on the one hand, there's Sheyesh Elokim Echad Yachid Umiyuchad, there's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is Echad Yachid Umiyuchad, there is nothing else other than him, it's singular. As the Ramchal points out, there's no will, there's no reality that's not just a derivative of that original, that only reality that exists. And that reality encompasses anything. It's echad, it's one, it's yachid, it's singular, nothing else exists aside from it. There is nothing else like it out there. Umiyuchad, and it's unified entirely because everything else is encompassed within it. But on the other hand, bara kol ha'olamos v'hu mashgiach aleihem b'chol esu v'chol rega. And on the other hand, there's a bria that has been created by this Elokim, this Echad Yachid Miyuchad, which seems to suggest that there is something separate from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Olamos, right? A reality, an existence, creation, a bria. But even that bria, which appears to be separate and distinct, and which HaKadosh Baruch Hu then controls at a distance, it's not really at a distance, because the Yichud is still there, the Echad is still there, the Yachid is still there, the Miyuchad is still there, because if ever the Hashgacha was removed from this, it wouldn't be that creation would be left to its own devices. It's not like a parent who has hashgacha over a child, and then when the parent goes out, the child is still there. It's just left to their own devices and can make their own choices and can do their own thing and run amok. That's not what would happen if HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hashgacha was removed from creation. Rather, if that hashgacha was removed from creation, chozrim l'tohu vavo, everything would revert immediately to nothing and confusion and bilbul, tohu vavohu. That's because actually the creation that is being, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mashgiach on, isn't really separate from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's different. It's different from any time we think of a parent being mashgiach on a child, or anyone who manages or controls any kind of thing. Those two things are separate from each other. And while you're controlling and managing and directing that thing, it's following your direction. And then when you step back and stop managing and controlling, then it's following someone else's direction. That's not the case over here, because the truth is that the olamos that were created by this HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Echad Yachid Miyuchad are not really distinct and separate. They're intimately and totally dependent and constantly being created by that HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And so the hashgacha is not just a matter of control and management. The hashgacha is life force. Its definition. V'zehu shenemar, and this is what we say. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. That's what we say, that's what we mean, that's what we have in mind when we say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. That Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem, the Shem Havaya, the Echad, Yachid Miyuchad, the Mahave HaKol, who transcends Hove Haya V'yiyeh, Haya Hove V'yiyeh, who transcends time, who transcends all of reality. There can't be any differentiation of time in the place of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because there's Echad, Yachid Miyuchad. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Shem Havaya, Shema Yisrael, Hashem, Elokeinu, is also the same Elokeinu who is bara kol ha'olamos, with all of its differentiation and all of its distinction and all of its particularities. And it's really Hashem Echad. It's really just the same thing, and it's all Echad Yachid Miyuchad. It's the Shem Havaya. It's all united within that one thing. V'nemar, and we say as well, V'yadata hayom, Ki Hashem hu Elokim b'shamayim yima'av v'aretz mitachas ein od. We'll know on that day, meaning achras hayamim yimos HaMashiach, we'll know then that Hashem is Elokim. Hashem hu Elokim b'shamayim yima'av v'aretz mitachas ein od. Kilomar, all of this is saying she'ein shum koach zulaso yisbarach. There's nothing else other than HaKadosh Baruch Hu, despite the fact that he's bara kol olamos and he's mashgiach aleihem, which might create the impression and in some, one can read certain sources, and the Rambam, most commonly, one can read the Rambam, for example, as describing, and others as well, and some of them do hold this, but the position described here is that there is nothing running on its own. It can't run on its own. Nothing runs on its own. V'hu hamahave kol ha'olamos. Hashem is the one who makes real all of the olamos, who makes present, who makes real, who gives tangible reality to all of the olamos. Not just mashgiach aleihem, but is making them. V'hu hamachaya es kol olamos. He is giving life force to the olamos. V'hu hamakaimam, and he sustains them and establishes them as they are, defining them as what they are. That's the meaning of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And that's the meaning of Hashem Hu Elokim. I just want to pivot for a second to look at two other sources that discuss this just very, very briefly. One that I encountered only recently, thanks to Rabbi Simon Jacobson, who I heard a beautiful shir from on the Balatanya's Likutei Torah, a particular drush for Rosh Hashanah, where he discusses this idea of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. By the way, just tangentially, it's probably appropriate and relevant to connect the Aruch HaShulchan to the Baal HaTanya. The Aruch HaShulchan, as is well known, spent about 6 months with the Tzemach Tzedek, learning with, it's not clear exactly what he learned with him. He got smicha from him. He probably, maybe he learned Nister with him, but the Aruch HaShulchan, a paragon of Litvish halacha, classical Litvish halacha, spent about 6 months with learning with the Aruch HaShulchan, with the Tzemach Tzedek before he took up his position as Rav in Nevardik. In any case, the Balatanya says in Likutei Torah, Jerusalem L'Rosh Hashanah, he says as follows. He explains, he's talking about Shema Yisrael, and how, right? So this is what the Aruch HaShulchan is talking about. Shema Yisrael, what is it that it means? Perush, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, L'chora Lama Nemar Gimel Shemos. So he asks a simple question: why does it list 3 Shemos for HaKadosh Baruch Hu here? Right? Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. V'zeu Gimel Pa'amim Ach HaPerushu Kach Shama Lashon Havana Yisrael. The meaning of the pasuk is as follows. He says, Shama, Lashon Havana, Yisrael, hu bechinas haneshama hanikra Yisrael. We're saying Shema, understand. Who should understand? Yisrael, the bechina, the aspect, the facet of the neshama that's called Yisrael. What is the facet of the neshama that's called Yisrael? It's the facet of the neshama that's called Yisrael in contrast to Yaakov. Yaakov is Yud Ekev. Yaakov is the lower awareness, an awareness of tangible reality, a lower awareness, and Yisrael is a much higher awareness, an awareness kaviyachol mitzido, from the perspective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a much higher awareness. We're speaking to that higher awareness now because it takes that higher awareness to really appreciate how it is that Hashem and Elokeinu, as the Aruch HaShulchan says, the Yachid, Echad Yachid U'Miyuchad, and the Borach Kol Ha'olamos U'Mashgiach Aleim are one and the same thing. You have to have a higher awareness that can transcend and hold both of those opposites at the same time. And he says, so we're speaking to that part of ourselves. Shema Yisrael, Kol Echad Tzarich Lomar L'Neshama Shema V'Haven. Everyone needs to say, as they say this pasuk, have in mind when they say this pasuk, hear and understand, Ata Yisrael, you, the Neshama, you're not just Yaakov, Ata Yisrael, you are Yisrael, Bechinas HaNeshama, the higher aspect of the Neshama. What are we telling you? Hashem Elokeinu Hashem, Shehu Perish, Haya Hove V'yiyeh Berega Echad. Hashem, the Shem Havaya, is Haya Hove V'yiyeh Berega Echad, something that transcends, encompasses, collapses time, the most fundamental distinction that exists, into a single moment, into presence. Hashem shu l'mayla mehasechel, the Hashem, the Shem Havaya, that's l'mayla mehasechel, that can't be understood. Echad yachad u'miyuchad, encompasses everything. Hu Elokeinu, that Hashem, that Shem Havaya is Elokeinu. Hainu kochenu v'chiyusenu, our strength, our life force, our mashgiach aleihem, right? Our borei, who created us and gives us continuing life, but us, right? Meaning that's something we can relate to, as opposed to the Shem Havaya, which is l'mayla mehasechal, haya hove v'yeh beraga echad yachad u'miyuchad, something that collapses everything and is higher than anything we can really relate to in any real way, is also Elokeinu, which is something we can relate to, because if we are deeply in touch with ourselves, I'm alive, I'm here, I'm aware of myself, and that I can relate to. Hashem Echad, Hu Kulo Chad, all of this is Chad, and it's all Hashem Echad, it's all the Shem Havaya, it's all part of that transcendent Yachid, Echad, Yachid, Umiyuchad, total, all-encompassing Hashem Echad. Hey, that's what he's saying over here. That's what the kavana is of Hashem Elokeinu, of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, of to be miyached these two things. Hey, now importantly, he also brings the pasuk of Yadat Hayom Ki Hashem Hu Elokim B'Shamayim Mima'al V'Aretz Mitachas B'Shamayim Mima'al Hashem Hu Elokim Hashem Shem Havaya is Elokim B'Shamayim Mima'al up there, meaning the Shem Havaya Hashem the Echad Yachid Miyuchad that we can't relate to V'Al Ha'aretz Mitachas, and down here on earth Alash Aretz V'Al Ha'aretz Mitachas, down here the Shem Elokim, the thing we can relate to some extent. Ein od, the pasuk ends. Ein od, there's nothing else. Echad, Yachid, Umiyuchad. Again, going back to the same thing. Hashem, Hu Elokim, they are the same. And because they are the same, and because those two opposites of Shem Havaya and Shem Elokus, between the two of them encompass literally every possibility, there's nothing else other than that thing. And that thing is Echad, Yachid, Umiyuchad. It's only one thing. Okay. Now, it's worth pointing out, and here is something a little bit more from the world of the Orach HaShulchan, or from the Litvish world of the Orach HaShulchan, the Leshem Shavov Achlama, in his parish on Eitz Chaim Chelek HaBiurim, Perek Hey, Shar Acha Perek Hey Os Hey, has a long discussion about the idea of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Soli Olam Va'ed, and Hashem Hu Elokim, which is the second pasuk that the Aruch HaShulchan brings here. And he emphasizes, in a very, very short way, he emphasizes that Hashem Hu Elokim is a very, very, very profound idea. It's the idea that both of these things, both of these realities are true at the same time. Hashem, the essence, the atzmos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, encompasses both the Shem Havaya and the Shem Elokus all at once. But he says it's critical that part of the mitzvah of being miyached HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of recognizing, inculcating, appreciating, really internalizing the unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is an appreciation for the fact that these are two separate things that are somehow one. Don't, he says, be careful. Don't collapse them so quickly into one. Before you get to Hashem Hu Elokim, where they're the same, you also have to appreciate that there's Hashem and there's Elokim. Don't collapse them into one, because if you collapse them into one, Hashem Hu Elokim, your mind tends to go immediately to the Echad, Yachid, and Miyuchad, and you miss the details. You miss the Mamale Kol Alman, the imminent presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because now you're already relating to something that's impossible to conceptualize, and is L'mayla Min HaKol, is an Or Makif, is something that you can't access or internalize within the Kalim that we have and within the experience of being a human being in this world. And so it's important to appreciate these two things separately and then to bring them together. In any case, the Aruch HaShulchan continues, and he says, Uba Matan Torah, and at Matan Torah, Ra'inu ze b'chush. At Matan Torah, we actually saw this in a tangible sensory way, b'chush, with our senses. We knew it, we saw it. The way that I see my hand in front of my face, we saw Hashem Hu Elokim. Kidirsiv, it says right there, Ata haresa ladas, I have taught you to know, Ki Hashem Hu Elokim Ein Od Milvado. There's Hashem Hu Elokim Ein Od Milvado, Kolomar, meaning Ki Hashem Shebara Kol Holamos Hu Hamashkiach V'Hamanig Alehem La'ad Ulolamim Ve'Elokim Bi'aru Bashgacha V'Anhaga Ve'Ein Shum Kach Gadol Okatan Zulaso Yisparach. There's nothing else. How did we see this at Matan Torah? The Anochi, Hashem Elokecha. You see this in the Midrashim, a lot of the Midrashim about Matan Torah. Many Midrashim, many Marmari Chazal are dancing around this idea. The idea that one thing, HaKadosh Baruch Hu uttered one thing at Matan Torah, but it contained multitudes of ideas. People heard one thing was said, and multiple things were heard, or multiple dibros were uttered within the same utterance. Multiple opposite dibros, Zachar and Shamar, Anochi and Lo Yelecha, were uttered within the same utterance. An essential Roem es HaKolos they heard the sights and they saw the sounds. These are descriptions of an experience that transcends the normal bifurcation or the normal separation and distinctions that exist within our world. The experience of Matan Torah was an experience that transcended all of those differences, all of those experiences of like, we understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu within our world. Now, at Matan Torah, they're getting an otherworldly kind of experience that transcends all of that, where opposite things can coexist. Hashem Hu Elokim can coexist at the same time. That's Anochi and Lo Yeh being uttered at once. That's Zachar and Shamar being uttered at once. And this is why at Matan Torah everybody dies. They can't exist within a physical reality when accessing and becoming aware and conscious of that sort of reality, because living reality, material reality, is something that is ultimately bounded within those differences and boundaries and distinctions. And the two cannot coexist at the same time. Okay, so I had hoped to get through a little further today, but I think it was worthwhile just to flesh out these ideas a little bit. So we got through Sif Hey, we're up to Sif Vav, and Bezras Hashem will continue that later this week. Have a wonderful, fantastic day.